Final Fantasy IX means lots of different things to a lot of different people. It repackaged and perfected much of what predated it, not only as a love letter to the series and its fans, but as an artistic and literary creation that tackled some of the most dense and challenging themes. From the fear of death to self-actualization to free will, classism, race, xenophobia, and blind duty, it just keeps going. You'd think that a game overflowing with thematic resonance would inevitably see some of these issues short-shrifted, or exploit in a way that barely nods at the depth it could have, that, like so many other titles, hints at what it could explore had it the imaginative will and the creative ability. But 9 not only expertly tells you of the troubles that haunt each character and the weight they carry, it also shows you the world's intricacies, from subtle gestures and hilarious physical slapstick comedy to lived-in dwellings and moving, alive, bustling towns, with each crevice stuffed with detail and care, from the rural small-town folk and packed cottages to splendid, grand, and monstrous castles imposing precisely the attitude and culture of the respective kingdom. Final Fantasy IX depicts a convincing world of inhabitants willing to fight against Alexandria's transgressions. From thieves to academics to regents to entrepreneurs to inventors, it demonstrates quite clearly that to meet great violence and wrongdoing, it is your duty to meet it collectively, to fix what ails the world. That every single unit, every single citizen, has a role and a purpose in toppling evil. At every turn there is a helper, somebody willing to risk it all for the good. From Dr. Tot to Cid to all of Tantalus, Beatrix, to common citizens rebuilding Lindblum, this theme of collective and concentrated resistance pervades throughout all of Final Fantasy IX's world, and much of its themes explore and circle back to this idea. And to put it more plainly and more sentimentally, the idea of friendship and supportive systems lifting one up out of traumatic experiences and facilitating individual growth. The writers did an excellent job of carving out spaces for expressions of individual greatness, while still demonstrating the potency of connection and support and unified resistance. This constant thematic presence culminates in a scene highlighting the importance of that collectivity, of togetherness, of our shared experiences, and of how we survive. Of these connections ripping us out of the depths of our deepest despair and most crushing moments. Zidane, one of the less troubled characters throughout the game, and the stability of the team, the rock in its foundation through much of the game, always there for the vulnerable and unafraid of barking at those deserving of ridicule, even if he is a bit brash and arrogant, still does harbor insecurities about his past and purpose, which are eventually exposed by Garland, Zidane's creator and the primary villain of the second half of the game, in a scene that is not only one of the more emotionally powerful scenes in the game, but a massive reinforcement of Final Fantasy IX's core themes and a meticulous unfurling of the history of Terra and Gaia, and of Garland's ideology, of his view of ascension through dominance and total subjugation, oddly adjacent, much like most JRPG supervillains, to a lot of notorious fascist leaders, and one that would see all of Zidane's loved ones crush under Garland's boots. The scene is there to demonstrate the shock and trauma and disconnection Zidane momentarily felt. That of course he'd want his friends and allies to leave. He discovered that he's a being to be nothing more than a destructive force, and this broke him. It fractured that stability, that seemingly unwaverable courage and affability, to an almost comical point, but I eventually just felt sad. He was devastated, and in that moment kept pushing his friends away. This is Zidane in an anguished and totally defeated state. I've seen pretty harsh criticisms of his character over this exact scene, and I find them to be pretty short-sighted and missing the point. On top of that, it's very evident Garland plunged him into this defeated state to begin with. Zidane tried initially to fight it and was succeeding. Garland then tried to turn him into an empty vessel, a regular genome. Most of us know all too well the toll it takes on us to be told or to be expected to be something or someone that you simply aren't. This takes that situation and tragically amplifies it. Zidane knows who he is. In fact, I'd say that throughout the bulk of the game, he is one of only a few characters that seems to know exactly what he stands for and who he is, while clearly occasionally hinting at those insecurities that can haunt us all. This revelation by Garland, that he was merely a puppet, a tool, was just too much. What follows is simply beautiful and genuinely moving. It is a procession of the game's main cast coming forward to remind Zidane of not only his importance to them, but of their importance to him, ignoring his impertinent and defeated verbal shoves, lifting him out of the abyss, urging him to stay strong, much like Zidane himself did for most of the cast throughout the game. The writers easily could have fumbled this perfect eventuality of tightly constructed theming and storytelling by doing a myriad of less impressive and moving things. This segment is the capstone, and to be frank, it still gets worse for the group as the game continues to plunge them deeper and deeper into more impossibly grim situations. As Kuja gropes at eternity and then, understanding and accepting his own finality, attempts to end everything, and then yet again as the team looks the embodiment of death and despair dead on and has to fight to live. Again. The party has every reason at this point to just let go from sheer exhaustion and overwhelming odds that the cast has incessantly confronted. The incomprehensible anguish and trauma and absolute madness that this group has witnessed in a very brief period of time, it's hard to come to terms with, but yet again, they persist, collectively. What makes this message of togetherness and group resistance so ultimately powerful in the context of Final Fantasy IX, as I hinted at earlier, is its inclusion of personal feats of greatness and its unwillingness to erase the individual. All of the characters have some very personal problems or development or shared and universal experience, but explored very specifically, showing both the private and individual ramifications next to the large-scale suffering that must be met. Even Zidane at the end of the game has a moment that he must approach and complete on his own, finding Kuja as he takes his last breaths and grows as he witnesses the group fight tooth and nail to live, that it inspires something in him, which is honestly a subject for an entirely separate video. But this could easily be read as a moment that undermines my reading of the game's message, but I think this, and the numerous moments of greatness by all of the world's inhabitants, actually augment it. It never sacrifices or subdues the individual, and Steiner's entire arc smartly explores this and the problems with pushing your own desires and goals down, but always maintains that it's sometimes tough, stressful, uncomfortable, and even dangerous to fight for what is right, but it's infinitely easier to stand together in that fight.